Hyunwoo Kim looked out the small window of his transport ship as the massive space station grew larger. The Galactic Council's main station was bigger than any city he had ever seen. Metal and glass stretched in all directions, with thousands of lights blinking like stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved around it like busy insects. "First time seeing it?" asked So-Min Park, his aide. She sat across from him, checking her data pad for the 100th time that day. "Yes," Hyunwoo said. "It's hard to believe. Humans are finally part of this." The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Hyunwoo straightened his simple black suit and picked up his briefcase. As Earth's newest ambassador to the Galactic Council, he wanted to make a good first impression. This strategic summit would decide trade agreements that could help or hurt billions of people across the galaxy. They walked through the docking tube and into the station. The first thing Hyunwoo noticed was how different all the aliens looked. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others looked like giant insects with too many arms. A few seemed to be made of living crystal that changed colors as they moved. "This way, please," said a mechanical voice. A floating robot led them toward a security checkpoint. Hyunwoo watched as the other delegations went through security. The tall, lizard-like creatures called Vorthak kept their plasma rifles even after scanning. The insect aliens called Kalari had weapons built into their own bodies. Sharp claws, poison sacs, and things that looked like small cannons grew from their arms and backs. The crystal beings, the Nexari, carried devices that hummed with energy. Even the smaller, furry aliens had some kind of weapon strapped to their sides. "Next," called a voice. Hyunwoo and So-Min stepped forward. The security scanner was different from the others. Instead of just checking their weapons, it took everything away. "Sir, I need to take your briefcase," said the security guard, a large Vorthak with yellow eyes. "But it just has papers and a pen," Hyunwoo said. "Sorry, special rules for humans. Even pens are not allowed." So-Min frowned. "What about my data pad?" "No electronic devices either. You can get copies of all documents from our system." Hyunwoo looked around. Every other species walked through security keeping their weapons. Some had enough firepower to level a building, but humans couldn't even keep a pen. "Is there a problem?" asked a new voice. Hyunwoo turned to see a very tall Vorthak walking toward them. This one wore fancy robes and had gold markings on his scales. His yellow eyes studied them carefully. "I am Thesek, Chief of Protocol for the Council. You must be Ambassador Kim." "Yes, that's me. I'm confused about these security rules. Why are humans treated differently?" Thesek made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are subject to Special Provision 847H. It was put in place long before you were born." "But why?" So-Min asked. "We're the only ones who have to give up everything." "Your species has a very interesting file," Thesek said. "Come, the summit is about to begin." They walked through long hallways filled with aliens from across the galaxy. Hyunwoo felt strange being the only one without any kind of weapon or tool. Even the smallest aliens had something sharp or dangerous with them. The main meeting hall was enormous. A round table sat in the center with seats for representatives from 13 different species. Humans had only recently become the 13th member of the council. Hyunwoo took his seat between a Kalari delegate and a Nexari. Both of them had multiple weapons visible. The Kalari's claws clicked nervously on the table. The Nexari's crystal body pulsed with soft blue light that Hyunwoo had learned meant they were ready to fight. "Welcome to the 847th Strategic Summit," Thesek announced. "Today we discuss trade routes through the Outer Rim and defense agreements for the new territories." The meeting began like any other political gathering Hyunwoo had attended on Earth. Different groups wanted different things. The Vorthak wanted more military control. The Kalari wanted exclusive mining rights. The Nexari wanted to study everything. But something felt wrong. Every few minutes, delegates would touch their weapons or adjust their armor. The Vorthak representative kept one hand on his plasma rifle. A small bird-like alien had what looked like a grenade attached to his belt. "Why is everyone so armed?" Hyunwoo whispered to So-Min during a break. "I don't know. Maybe it's normal. For them?" Hyunwoo watched as two delegates got into an argument about shipping lanes. Instead of just raising their voices, they both reached for their weapons. Other delegates quickly moved their hands to their own guns and blades. The argument ended quickly, but Hyunwoo realized something important. These beings didn't just carry weapons for show. They expected to use them. After the first session ended, Hyunwoo approached Thesek. "Can you tell me more about this special provision that applies to humans?" Thesek's eyes grew narrow. "That information is classified at the highest level. But I'm a council member now. Surely I have the right to know why my species is treated differently." "You have the right to know many things, Ambassador Kim, but not this. Not yet." "When will I be able to know?" Thesek looked around the room at all the armed delegates. Some were cleaning their weapons. Others were checking their armor for damage. "Perhaps," Thesek said slowly, "you will understand by the end of this summit. Your species has a very unusual effect on others." "What kind of effect?" But Thesek was already walking away. That night, Hyunwoo couldn't sleep in his assigned quarters. He kept thinking about what he had seen. 12 different species, all carrying enough weapons to start a war. And then there were the humans. Completely defenseless, not even allowed to keep a pen. So Min knocked on his door. "Sir, I've been thinking about what happened today." "What about it?" "Everyone else expects violence. They're ready for it. But we're not allowed to even defend ourselves. I noticed that too. The question is why?" "Maybe," So-min said carefully, "we're not the ones who need protection." Hyunwoo looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean maybe the weapons aren't to protect them from us. Maybe the weapons are to protect them from each other. And maybe we're not allowed to have weapons because..." She paused. "Because what?" "Because we don't need them." The next morning brought news that would change everything. A message had arrived during the night. 2 of the galaxy's most powerful species were preparing for war, and the Council had been asked to mediate. The Vorthak and Kalari, ancient enemies, had found something worth fighting over. As Hyunwoo prepared for another day of meetings, he wondered if he would finally learn the truth about Special Provision 847H. Looking around at all the heavily armed delegates, he began to suspect that being weaponless might not be the disadvantage he had thought it was. Something told him he was about to find out why. 3 days into the summit, Hyunwoo still had no answers about why humans were treated differently. Every session brought new arguments between the armed delegates. Today felt different, though. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. "We have a problem," Thesek announced at the start of the morning session. "The Kalari Hive and the Nixari Collective are mobilizing their fleets. They both claim ownership of the new hyperspace routes near the spiral arm." Murmurs went around the table. The Kalari delegate, a large insect with blade-like arms, clicked his mandibles angrily. "The routes pass through space we claimed first." The Nixari representative's crystal body flashed red. "Your claim has no legal basis. We surveyed that region 2 cycles before your scouts arrived." "Scouts?" The Kalari's voice buzzed with rage. "Those were colony ships full of eggs. You destroyed them. We defended ourselves from invasion." Hyunwoo watched as both delegates reached for their weapons. Other aliens around the table did the same. In seconds, the peaceful meeting had become a standoff. "Enough!" Thesek's voice boomed. "Put your weapons down. We are here to talk, not fight." Slowly, reluctantly, the delegates lowered their weapons, but their hands stayed close to them. "This situation requires special attention," Thesek continued. "I am calling in our most experienced mediator." The doors opened and an old man walked in. His hair was gray, and he moved slowly, but his eyes were sharp and kind. Hyunwoo recognized him immediately from the council files. "Jae-hyun Lee," So-min whispered. "He's been with the council longer than any other human." Jae-hyun took a seat next to Hyunwoo. Unlike everyone else in the room, he carried nothing. No weapons, no armor, no tools of any kind. "The situation is serious," Jae-hyun said in his quiet voice. Both species are preparing for total war. But before we discuss solutions, I think our new ambassador should understand something important. He looked at Hyunwoo. You've been wondering about Special Provision 847H. Yes. No one will tell me why humans can't carry weapons. Because the last time a human was armed during a crisis like this, it changed the galaxy forever. Jae-hyun stood up slowly. It happened 300 years ago. I was much younger then, working as a translator. The galaxy was being torn apart by the border wars between the Kalari and the Nixari. The room grew quiet. Even the armed delegates stopped checking their weapons. Both species were locked in a fight that had lasted 50 years. Jae-hyun continued. Billions had died. Entire star systems were destroyed. The council was desperate. Nothing they tried worked. Military force was useless because both sides were too strong. Traditional diplomacy had failed completely. The Kalari delegate shifted uncomfortably. That was long ago. We were different then. Were you? Jae-hyun asked gently. What changed? The insect being had no answer. In their desperation, the council turned to a species that had just invented faster-than-light travel. Humans. We were new, neutral, and had no reason to favor either side. Jae-hyun walked over to a large display screen and activated it. Images of space battles filled the air. Ships exploded in silent flashes. Planets burned. Captain Mi-young Choi of the exploration ship Sejong was asked to mediate. The meeting would take place on a contested moon called Haven 7. Both species maintained armed forces there. Hyunwoo leaned forward. What happened? Something unprecedented. But first you need to understand the situation. The Kalari had evolved as a hive species. Everything they did was about the survival of their queen and their eggs. They saw the Nexari as a threat to their very existence, the crystal being pulsed blue. We acted in self-defense. The Kalari expand by consuming everything in their path. And the Nexari, Jae-hyun said, turning to the crystal delegate, had evolved as pure logic beings. They believed that organic life was inefficient and dangerous. They saw the Kalari as a virus to be eliminated. We were protecting the galaxy from chaos, the Nexari said. Both sides were right, from their own perspective, Jae-hyun said. And both sides were absolutely committed to destroying the other. When Captain Choi arrived at Haven 7, she found two armies ready for the final battle. The old man touched the screen, and new images appeared. A small human ship surrounded by massive war fleets from both species. Standard protocol demanded the Captain Choi bring an armed escort. Both sides had weapons that could kill millions, but Mi-young Choi made a decision that shocked everyone. What decision? Hyunwoo asked. She came alone. No weapons, no guards, no armor. Just her, a translator, and a thermos of coffee her grandmother had given her. The room was completely silent now. Even the most warlike delegates had stopped moving. The meeting took place in a neutral building on Haven 7. The Kalari Queen voice arrived with 50 warrior drones, each one armed with bioweapons that could melt steel. The Nexari Resonance Prime came with 30 crystal warriors carrying energy weapons that could level mountains. Jae-hyun sat back down. Captain Choi arrived with nothing but a smile and her thermos. That sounds like suicide, Somin whispered. Many thought so. The Kalari Queen voice was a creature bred for war from birth. She had never known peace. The Nexari Resonance Prime was a being of pure logic who calculated that organic life was fundamentally flawed. How could talking to them possibly work? Hyunwoo asked. Because, Jae-hyun said with a small smile, Captain Choi didn't talk to them about the war. What do you mean? She talked about her grandmother. The delegates around the table looked confused. The Kalari's antennae twitched. The Nexari's body flickered between colors. I was there as the translator, Jae-hyun continued. I watched something impossible happen. Captain Choi sat between two armies ready to commit genocide, and she started telling stories about making kimchi during Korean winters. Kimchi? Taesek's voice showed surprise. She talked about how her grandmother Yoon-suk had taught her that the strongest families were those who knew when to fight and when to feed their enemies. She talked about children playing games where victory meant everyone got to eat. The Kalari delegate was listening intently now. She spoke of feeding enemies? Yes. She explained how human communities survived harsh winters by sharing resources, even with people they didn't like. She talked about how showing weakness could actually be a sign of ultimate strength. The Nexari's body had turned a soft purple color. This is illogical. Weakness leads to death. That's exactly what the Resonance Prime said 300 years ago, Jae-hyun replied. But then Captain Choi asked him a question that changed everything. What question? She asked him to calculate the energy cost of the war versus the energy cost of cooperation, not just for 1 year but for 1,000 years. The modern Nexari delegate's body began cycling through colors rapidly. Hyunwoo guessed this meant he was thinking hard. The numbers, the Nexari said slowly. Exactly. When the Resonance Prime ran the calculations, he discovered that cooperation was not just more efficient than war. It was exponentially more productive. The energy spent on weapons could build entire civilizations. And the Kellery? Hyunwoo asked. The Queen voice was fascinated by human child-rearing practices. She learned that human young were completely helpless for years, but this weakness created stronger family bonds. She began to understand that vulnerability could create trust instead of opportunity for attack. Jae-hyun stood up again. Captain, Choi proposed something radical. A joint colony where both species would be vulnerable together, where survival meant cooperation. That sounds impossible, Somin said. It was. But then Captain Choi made an offer that changed everything. She volunteered to have human families settle in the colony too. Completely defenseless families with children. The room was so quiet that Hyunwoo could hear the air circulation system. She offered humans as living guarantees that neither side would betray the peace. If either species attacked the colony, they would be killing the defenseless humans who had trusted them. And they agreed? Hyunwoo couldn't believe it. After 3 days of discussion, yes. The colony was established on Haven 7. Kellery and Nexari families moved there together, protected by the presence of vulnerable human families, who had chosen to trust them both. Thesek spoke for the first time in minutes. That colony still exists today. It has become one of the most prosperous worlds in the galaxy. But that's not the end of the story, Jae-hyun said. What happened next is why Special Provision 847H exists. He looked around the room at all the armed delegates. The colony didn't just succeed. It changed both species fundamentally. Kalari children began playing with Nexari young. They created new games, new art, new ways of thinking. The warrior drones learned to tend gardens, the logic crystals learned to laugh. The modern delegates looked uncomfortable. Within 1 generation, neither species was the same. They had learned something from the humans that spread throughout their entire civilizations. What did they learn? Hyunwoo asked. Jae-hyun's eyes grew serious. They learned that there were better things to do than fight. The old man returned to his seat. And that, Ambassador Kim, is why humans are not allowed to carry weapons to strategic summits. Because the last time a human mediated a crisis while unarmed, 2 entire species voluntarily chose to become something better than they were. Hyunwoo looked around the table at all the armed delegates. For the first time, the emergency session began 2 hours after Jae-hyun finished his story. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Kellery and Nexari fleets were moving toward the disputed hyperspace routes. Both species had issued final ultimatums. The situation is critical, Thesek announced. We have 6 hours before the first shots are fired. If these 2 species go to war, it will pull in half the galaxy. Hyunwoo watched the tactical display showing fleet movements. Thousands of ships from both sides were converging on a small region of space near the spiral arm. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a moon. We need to send mediators immediately, said the Vortak military representative. His scales had turned a darker color, which Hyunwoo had learned meant aggression. But they must be heavily armed. Both fleets are trigger-happy right now. Armed mediators will only make things worse, Jae-hyun said calmly. When beings expect violence, Weapons create violence. Then what do you suggest, old man? The Kalari delegate's voice buzzed with irritation. Send gifts and flowers? I suggest we send what worked before, a human with nothing but good intentions. The room erupted in arguments. Multiple delegates spoke at once, their voices mixing into chaos. Several reached for their weapons before catching themselves. That was different. The Nexari delegate's body flashed angry red. That was 300 years ago. Both species have evolved since then. We are not the same naive beings who fell for human tricks. Tricks? Hyunwoo found himself speaking, before he realized it. The room grew quiet. You think kindness is a trick? The crystal being's color shifted to a cooler blue. I think your species uses emotional manipulation to achieve its goals. And what goals are those? Control, dominance through deception. Hyunwoo felt anger rising in his chest, but then he remembered something his daughter Sujin had said just before he left Earth. She had been painting a picture of their garden using colors that shouldn't work together but somehow did. You know, he said quietly, my daughter is 7 years old. She's learning to paint. The delegates looked confused by the sudden change of topic. She insists on using colors that don't match. Purple flowers with orange leaves, blue grass under, a green sky. Her art teacher keeps telling her it's wrong, but Sujin says she likes it when things are different together. What does this have to do with preventing a war? The Vorthak delegate asked impatiently. Maybe everything, Hyunwoo said. What if the problem isn't the hyperspace routes? What if the problem is that two different species are afraid of each other? Of course they're afraid, So-min said. They've been enemies for centuries. But why? The war ended 300 years ago. Both species have changed, according to the Nexari delegate. So why are they still afraid? Jae-hyun was watching Hyunwoo with interest. What do you think? Think, Hyunwoo said slowly. They're not afraid of each other. They're afraid of becoming like each other. The room was quiet again. The Kalari are afraid that if they work with the Nexari, they'll lose their identity as a warrior species. The Nexari are afraid that if they cooperate with the Kalari, they'll become less logical, less perfect. That's ridiculous, the Kalari delegate said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? You said yourself that you're different now than you were 300 years ago. Both species changed after working together on Haven 7. Maybe that's what scares you. The Nexari delegate's body was cycling through colors rapidly. Change is not inherently negative. But it's scary, Hyunwoo said. Especially when you don't control it. Thesek leaned forward. Are you suggesting that this conflict is about fear of change rather than territorial disputes? I'm suggesting that maybe we should ask them directly. That's impossible, the Vorthak delegate said. Both fleets are in full combat mode. They won't listen to anything except surrender terms. They'll listen to the right person saying the right things, Jae-hyun said. And who might that be? Jae-hyun looked at Hyunwoo. Someone who understands that being different together can create something beautiful. 2 hours later, Hyunwoo found himself on a small shuttle heading toward the combat zone. He had volunteered to attempt mediation, despite every logical argument against it. Both fleets were armed and ready for battle. One mistake, one wrong word, and he would be vaporized along with his shuttle. Are you sure about this? So-min asked over the communication system. She had wanted to come with him, but the shuttle could only carry one person safely through the combat zone. No, Hyunwoo admitted. But Jae-hyun was right about one thing. Someone has to try. The shuttle's sensors detected the first ships 30 minutes later. Massive Kalari bioships that looked more like living creatures than machines. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Hyunwoo's translator said meant, ready to kill. Unidentified vessel, you are entering a restricted combat zone, came a buzzing voice. State your business or be destroyed. This is Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim representing the Galactic Council. I request permission to speak with your fleet commander. We do not recognize council authority in this matter. Turn around or die. I'm unarmed and alone. I just want to talk. There was a long pause. You are the human mediator? Yes. Another pause, longer this time. You may approach the command ship. Any aggressive action will result in immediate destruction. The Kalari command ship was enormous, shaped like a giant insect with wings that stretched for kilometers. As Hyunwoo's shuttle docked, he could see smaller ships moving around it like worker bees around their queen. The docking bay was dark and humid, designed for insect-like beings, rather than humans. Kalari warriors surrounded his shuttle as he emerged. Each one was twice his size with blade-like arms and mandibles that could cut through steel. "I am War Prime Thekva," said the largest warrior. "I command this fleet. Why have you come to die here, human? I came to talk about why you're really fighting. We fight for territory, for resources, for survival. Do you? Or do you fight because you're afraid of what happens if you don't?" The War Prime's antennae twitched. "Explain." 300 years ago, your species learned something new on Haven 7. You learned that cooperation could be stronger than conquest, that sharing could be better than taking. Ancient history. Is it? How many of your current warriors were born on Haven 7? How many grew up playing with Nexari children? The War Prime was quiet for a moment. Some. What does it matter? It matters because they remember something different than war. They remember friendship. And that scares the pure warriors, doesn't it? We are Kalari. We are born to fight. Some of you are. But not all of you. Some of you are born to build. Some are born to grow. Some are born to create new things that never existed before. Hyunwoo walked closer to the giant insect warrior. The question is, are you fighting the Nexari, or are you fighting the parts of your own species that have learned to be something more than warriors? Before the War Prime could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Nexari vessels. "Approaching!" came urgent voices over the communication system. "They come to attack while we talk," the War Prime snarled. "This proves their treachery." "Or maybe," Hyunwoo said, "they're doing exactly what we're doing, trying to figure out what they're really fighting for." The tactical display showed 3 Nexari ships approaching. They were beautiful geometric constructions of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns. "This is Thought Prime Velnaran of the Nexari Collective," came a voice like singing crystal. "We request permission to participate in the mediation." The War Prime's mandibles clicked angrily. "It's a trap." "Is it?" Hyunwoo asked. "They could have attacked while we were talking. Instead, they're asking to join the conversation." Minutes later, the docking bay held representatives from both species. Kalari warriors faced Nexari crystal beings, weapons ready on both sides. The tension was so thick it was hard to breathe. "Why do you really want these hyperspace routes?" Hyunwoo asked both groups. "For expansion," the War Prime said. "For efficiency," the Thought Prime replied. "But you both have hundreds of other routes available. Why these specific ones?" "They are the fastest paths to the outer rim," the Nexari said. "They pass through space we need for new hives," the Kellery added. "Space you both need for the same reason," Hyunwoo realized. "You're both expanding toward the same region." "Of course," the War Prime said. "The outer rim has resources both species require, so instead of fighting over who gets to use the routes, why not use them together?" Both beings started to object, but Hyunwoo continued. "On Haven 7, your ancestors learned that sharing resources made both species stronger. What if sharing these routes did the same thing?" "Impossible," the Thought Prime said. "Our expansion patterns are incompatible." "Are they? Or are you just afraid that if you work together, you might like it?" The crystal being's light dimmed. "That is not relevant." "Isn't it? You've both spent 300 years becoming something more than your ancestors. The Kalari aren't just warriors anymore. The Nexari aren't just logic machines. You've both learned to be more complex, more interesting." Hyunwoo looked between them. "But you're fighting each other because you're afraid that becoming more complex makes you weaker. You think that the old ways were safer." "The old ways were clearer," the War Prime admitted. "Clearer, yes. But were they better?" Neither being answered. The news of the peaceful resolution spread across the galaxy within hours. The Kelari and Nexari fleets had not only avoided war, but had announced a joint colonization project. Species across the galaxy celebrated what seemed like another diplomatic victory. But Hyunwoo noticed something strange in the days that followed. The other council delegates acted differently around him. They were polite, even friendly, but there was something else in their eyes. Something that looked like fear. "Congratulations on your success," Thesek said during a private meeting 3 days after the crisis ended. "The council is very pleased." "Thank you. I'm just glad we avoided a war." "Yes, war is always unfortunate." The large Vorthak paused. "Tell me, Ambassador Kim, do you understand what you actually accomplished out there?" "I helped 2 species realize they were fighting over something they could share." "Did you?" Thesek's yellow eyes studied him carefully. "Or did you do something else entirely? I don't understand." "No, I don't think you do. That's what makes your species so dangerous." Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. "Dangerous? We prevented a war. We saved lives." "Yes, you did. Just like Captain Choi did 300 years ago. Just like humans have done in every major conflict since then." Thesek stood up and walked to his office window, which showed the vast expanse of space. "Do you know how many galactic wars have been prevented by human mediators?" "Some. I read about a few cases. 47. 47 conflicts that should have resulted in billions of deaths, ended peacefully because humans talked to the combatants. That's good, isn't it?" "For whom?" The question confused Hyunwoo. "For everyone. For the galaxy." "Is it?" Thesek turned back to face him. "Let me tell you what really worries the Council about your species." The Vorthak activated his office display, showing images of different worlds. "This is Haven 7, where Captain Choi established the first joint colony. Look at it now." The image showed a beautiful world covered in mixed cities. Kelari biostructures grew next to Nexari crystal formations. The 2 architectural styles had merged into something entirely new. This is the Meridian system, where human mediator Haejin Park ended the spiral war 70 years ago. Another image appeared. 3 different species now live there as one people. They've created art, music, and technology that none of them could have imagined alone. More images followed. World after world where humans had mediated conflicts, and where multiple species now lived together in ways that defied their original natures. "It's beautiful," Hyunwoo said. "Yes. And that's the problem." "How can beauty be a problem?" Thesek sat back down. "Ambassador Kim, in your species mythology, is there a story about someone who offers something wonderful, but the price is everything? You thought you were? Maybe. There are many stories like that. Your species does something that no other species in the galaxy has ever done. You don't conquer through force. You don't dominate through superior technology or numbers. Then how do we conquer? By making other species want to become like you." Hyunwoo stared at him. "That's not conquest. That's friendship." "Is it? Tell me, what happened to the pure Kelari warrior culture after Haven 7? It evolved, became more complex. It disappeared," Thesek said bluntly. "Within 2 generations, the Kelari hives that worked with humans had stopped producing pure warriors. They started creating artists, philosophers, gardeners. The old Kelari culture simply ceased to exist. But they chose that change. Did they? Or did they fall under the influence of a species that somehow makes everyone around them want to be better? Being better isn't a bad thing, isn't it?" Thesek's voice grew softer, more dangerous. "What if a species' strength comes from its aggression? What if its survival depends on being willing to fight? Then they find new strengths. Or they become extinct, not through violence, but through voluntary transformation into something else entirely." Hyunwoo felt his understanding of the situation shifting. "You think humans are a threat because we help species evolve?" I think humans are a threat because you make evolution seem desirable. You make species want to give up what they are to become what you are. And what are we? Cooperative, empathetic, willing to sacrifice for others, able to find common ground with anyone. Thesek paused. Do you see the problem? No. Those traits are incredibly attractive. When other species encounter humans, they begin to wonder why they ever thought violence was necessary, why they ever prioritized their own survival over others' well-being, why they ever believed that being different meant being enemies. Yunwu was quiet for a long moment. So, the Council is afraid that we'll make everyone peaceful? The Council is afraid that you'll make everyone human. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Not biologically, Thesek continued, but culturally, psychologically. Every species that works closely with humans begins to adopt human values, human ways of thinking, human approaches to problems. Is that really so terrible? For the galaxy's diversity, yes. For species that find their identity in being warriors, or pure logicians, or hive minds, potentially catastrophic. Hyunwoo thought about this. But the species that change seem happier. Do they? Or do they just think they're happier because happiness is a human value that you've taught them to want? Now you're just being paranoid. I? Thesek activated his display again. This time it showed statistical charts. Since first contact with humans, average violence across the galaxy has decreased by 78%. Interspecies cooperation has increased by 400%. Art, music, and cultural exchange have exploded. Those sound like good things. They are, from a human perspective. But what about from the perspective of a species that evolved to find meaning in struggle? What about beings who define themselves through conflict and competition? They find new ways to define themselves. Or they lose themselves entirely. Thesek's voice grew heavy. Do you know what happened to the Corvasi? I've never heard of them. Of course not. They were a species of pure traders. Everything in their culture revolved around negotiation, profit, and individual success. 50 years ago, they had a territorial dispute with the Aldorians. What happened? Human mediator Eugene Kim convinced them that sharing resources was more profitable than hoarding them. Within one generation, the Corvasi had abandoned their entire economic system. They became a communal species focused on collective well-being. That sounds positive. The traditional Corvasi culture is extinct. Their language is dying out because it had too many words for different types of personal ownership and not enough words for cooperation. Their art, their music, their entire way of understanding the universe all gone. Hyunwoo felt a growing unease. But they chose to change. After spending time with humans, after being exposed to human ideas about what life should be like. Tell me, do you think that was really a free choice? Are you saying we brainwash other species? I'm saying you present an alternative way of living that's so appealing that other species can't resist it, even when adopting it means the end of their traditional culture. Maybe their traditional cultures needed to end. That's exactly the kind of thing a human would say. Thesek's eyes narrowed. You can't imagine that there might be value in ways of life that aren't based on cooperation and mutual benefit. Can you? The question caught Thesek off guard. He was quiet for several seconds. The Vorthak have been warriors for 10,000 years, he said finally. We find meaning in struggle, in testing ourselves against worthy opponents, in the honor of battle. These are not human values. But you're here talking instead of fighting. Because we've learned that humans can destroy us without firing a shot. You can make us want to stop being Vorthak. And that terrifies you. More than any weapon ever could? Hyunwoo leaned back in his chair. So Special Provision 847H isn't to protect humans. It's to protect everyone else from humans. Now you're beginning to understand? Because armed humans would be less dangerous than unarmed humans. Much less dangerous. Armed humans are just Another species that uses violence to solve problems. We understand that. We know how to deal with that. But unarmed humans are something else entirely. Unarmed humans are a species that can win wars by convincing their enemies that war isn't worth fighting. That can conquer worlds by making their inhabitants want to be conquered. That can end thousand-year-old cultures by offering something better. Tesek stood up again. Do you know what the most frightening thing about your species is? Ambassador Kim, what? You do it all with genuine kindness. You're not trying to destroy other cultures, you're trying to help them. You actually believe that your way is better and you want to share it with everyone. Because it is better. There. You said it. You can't even imagine that there might be legitimate value in ways of life that prioritize individual strength over collective cooperation, or logical purity over emotional connection, or honorable combat over peaceful resolution. Can there be? That question, Tesek said quietly, is why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He walked toward the door. And why you're not allowed to carry weapons to strategic summits, because armed humans might only conquer a few worlds, but unarmed humans might accidentally convince the entire galaxy to become human. As the door closed behind him, Hyunwoo sat alone. 2 weeks had passed since Thesek's revelation, and Hyunwoo found himself seeing everything differently. Every interaction with alien delegates took on new meaning. When the insectoid Hithri representative asked him about human child-rearing practices, Hyunwoo wondered if he was accidentally spreading human values. When the crystalline Zethori began adopting human greetings, he questioned whether he was witnessing cultural exchange or cultural conquest. The current crisis made these questions more urgent than ever. The situation is unprecedented, Tesek announced to the emergency session. The Vorthak Confederation and the Kalari United Hives are mobilizing for total war. All diplomatic contact has been severed. Hyunwoo studied the tactical displays. This wasn't like the previous conflict between individual fleets. This was two of the galaxy's most powerful species preparing to destroy each other. What caused this? Asked So-min, who had been promoted to senior diplomatic advisor after the successful mediation. Resources, replied the Nexari delegate, whose crystal body pulsed with agitated colors. The discovery of Element 7 deposits in the Terminus sector. Both species claim exclusive rights. Element 7 is the key component for faster-than-light communication, added a delegate from the aquatic Morden species. Whoever controls it, controls information flow across the galaxy. Hyunwoo listened to the debate with growing concern. Unlike previous conflicts, this one had no obvious middle ground. Element 7 couldn't be shared. It was too rare and too strategically important. Traditional mediation has failed, Tesek continued. Both species have refused council arbitration. They've pulled out of all joint ventures. The Vorthak have even expelled Kalari citizens from their territories. How long until shooting starts? Hyunwoo asked. 72 hours. Maybe less. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Vorthak and Kalari had been allies for 2 centuries, ever since the Joint Colony Project. If they went to war now, it would shatter the galactic peace that humans had helped build. We need to send someone, said Jae-hyun, who had been quietly listening. Someone both sides trust. Who could they possibly trust now? Asked the Morden delegate. They've convinced themselves that this is about survival. They trust humans, Tesek said quietly. Both species have worked with human mediators before. Both have seen what we can do. What you can do, corrected the Nexari delegate. The question is whether you should do it. All eyes turned to the crystal being. Explain, Tesek demanded. I have been analyzing the long-term effects of human mediation on galactic culture. The patterns are disturbing. The Nexari's body shifted to a deep blue color that Hyunwoo had learned meant serious contemplation. In every case where humans have mediated a conflict, the participating species have undergone fundamental cultural changes within 50 years. The Kalari abandoned pure warrior culture. The original Nexari logic paradigms were replaced with emotion-inclusive decision-making. The HFY collective consciousness learned individual expression. Those changes made them happier, Somin pointed out. Did they? Or did they simply adopt human definitions of happiness? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Every species that works closely with humans eventually begins to value cooperation over competition, empathy over logic, collective well-being over individual strength, the Nexari continued. This is not natural evolution. This is systematic cultural transformation. You're saying we infect other species with human values? Hyunwoo felt defensive. I'm saying that human contact inevitably leads to the adoption of human ethical frameworks, regardless of whether those frameworks are appropriate for non-human psychology. Thesek nodded slowly. This is why the Council established Special Provision 847H, not to handicap humans, but to limit your exposure to other species. Then why are you asking us to mediate now? Hyunwoo asked. Because, Thesek said heavily, we may not have a choice. The emergency alert sounded before anyone could respond. Red lights flashed throughout the chamber as urgent messages flooded the communication system. Report, Thesek barked. First shots fired, came the reply from the tactical center. Vorthak patrol destroyed a Kalari scouting ship in the terminus. Sector, both fleets are accelerating toward combat positions. Time to full engagement? 6 hours. The chamber erupted in panic. Delegates shouted in multiple languages while their translation devices struggled to keep up. Several species representatives began reaching for weapons before remembering where they were. Silence, Thesek's voice boomed over the chaos. We need solutions, not panic. There's only one solution, Jaehyun said calmly. Send Hyunwoo. Absolutely not. The Nexari delegate's body flashed angry red. We cannot continue using humans to solve every crisis. The cultural contamination must stop. Cultural contamination? Hyunwoo stood up, anger rising in his voice. Is that what you call peace? I call it the systematic replacement of galactic diversity with human monoculture. And I call it survival. Would you rather have diverse cultures or living cultures? I would rather have authentic cultures that develop naturally, rather than artificial ones shaped by human influence. Even if those authentic cultures lead to extinction through warfare, the Nexari's body cycled through several colors rapidly. That is their choice to make, is it? Hyunwoo looked around the room. Or is choosing violence just as much of a cultural bias as choosing peace? What do you mean? Asked the Mordun delegate. I mean, maybe the idea that species have to stay exactly the same to be authentic is wrong. Maybe growth and change are natural. Human growth and change, the Nexari corrected. No, universal growth and change. Do you think your species was exactly the same 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago? Of course not, but then you've already been changing. The only question is whether you change through contact with other species or through isolation. Hyunwoo walked to the center of the room. Every species here has been influenced by contact with others. The Vorthak learned metallurgy from the Zathori. The Kalari adopted crystal-growing techniques from the Nexari. The Mordun integrated biotechnology from 6 different species. That's different, Thesek said. That's sharing knowledge, not changing fundamental values. Is it? When the Mordun learned biotechnology, they went from being pure aquatic creatures to amphibious ones. They literally changed their bodies to adapt new knowledge. How is that different from changing psychological approaches to adapt new social knowledge? The room was quiet, except for the continuing alarms about the approaching war. You want to know the truth about humans, Hyunwoo continued. We don't make other species become like us. We help them discover parts of themselves they didn't know existed. Explain, Thesek demanded. The Kalari didn't abandon warrior culture. They discovered that they could be warriors for creation instead of destruction. The Nexari didn't abandon logic. They discovered that emotion could be another form of data. Every species that works with us doesn't lose what they were. They become more than what they were. That's a very human way of looking at it, the Nexari said. Maybe, or maybe, it's just accurate. Hyunwoo looked directly at the crystal being. Are you less Nexari now than you were before first contact with humans? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Are you diminished by being able to consider emotional data alongside logical data? Are the Kalari weaker because they can create as well as fight? Are the Vorthak less honorable because they can choose when to be warriors? No one answered. My daughter Sujin paints with colors that don't match. Her teacher says it's wrong, but Sujin creates beautiful things because she's not limited by rules about what colors are supposed to go together. What does that have to do with this crisis? Asked Somin. Everything. The Vorthak and Kalari are about to destroy each other because they think they have to choose between being warriors or being cooperative. They think that working together means stopping being themselves. Doesn't it? Thesek asked. Does a tree stop being a tree when it grows new branches? The metaphor seemed to resonate with several delegates. Even the Nexari's body shifted to a more contemplative purple. You're saying that cultural change can be growth rather than replacement, the Morden delegate said slowly. I'm saying that maybe the scariest thing about humans isn't that we change other cultures. Maybe it's that we show other cultures they can change themselves. Another alarm sounded. 4 hours to engagement, came the tactical report. Decision time, Jae-hyun said quietly. Thesek looked around the room at the assembled delegates. Vote. Send the human mediator or let them fight. One by one, the delegates voted. The Kalari and Nexari representatives both voted yes. The Morden voted yes. Even the smaller species voted to send Hyunwoo. Unanimous, Thesek announced. Ambassador Kim, you have 4 hours to prevent a galactic war. I'll need a ship, already prepared. And I'll go unarmed, as usual. Yes. As required by Special Provision 847H. Hyunwoo headed for the door, then paused. When this is over, I want that provision repealed. Why? Thesek asked. Because maybe it's time for the galaxy to trust that humans can carry weapons without using them. Maybe it's time to trust that we've learned the difference between conquest and friendship. And if you're wrong, if giving humans weapons leads to the cultural domination,